I remember, I forget who said it, about that soon we will enter into a sort of a weird like Jungian century. Um, do you think that do you think that in some ways, I mean, certainly, I mean, it's very easy to sort of like point to Jordan Peterson and be like, well, that's kind of just like self-help grifting for incels or whatever. But like, there's certainly something to be said about how, without ostensibly without any sort of higher order, people are going off in their own direction, and there's a bunch of supplicants to what is more natural to us, because most people, Nietzsche, the famous quote, what is it? It takes an immense price to have the privilege of owning your own self.
Mhm.
What sort of is your vision of the future when we enter a time where more than ever, because of various things that are going on right now, without mentioning for the YouTube algorithm, uh, people are asked of themselves to not be sort of actualized, or well, even that word actualized is another self-help buzzword, but we're sort of being asked to become as stultified and as introverted and as isolated from each other more than ever, and it's all in a sort of bargain to preserve bare life above all else. Like, this is literally what this is Nietzsche's nightmare, what we're living through right now. It's to preserve bare life. It's to listen to the maggots on the bread of life in the marketplace, and to preserve that which is just like this clutching on, which is driven by fear and death denial, this sort of clutching of just material life without any sort of verve or substance, because we can't really go towards those possibilities anymore, because then like the mass, the herd will tell
Yeah.
us that we're going to kill grandmother or something. So what do you feel is the role of both Nietzsche and Jung in our current world situation or world picture? Where do you see the future going? Yeah.
Um, so it's a great question, and it's a very, very interesting one. So I did lay out certain first principles throughout the conversation here that I think are incredibly important to highly discipline your mind too, because fundamentally the future is going to be predicated on the same principles as the past. As much as like it feels like it's the end of the time, I've got to go with those first principles, because it's the only way I can control chaos. If this is the end of the fucking time, all right, I'm out of here. I'm done. It's like, Jesus, please, the trauma samsara, I'm sorry, please take me. But instead, I got to sort of say to myself, all right, well, listen, operantly through the past, the people who are incorrect and weak, and I mean weak in discipline and weak in spirit, and incorrect, weak, not in tune with reality and not making the right moves. They fundamentally ended up in the losing position, and they suffered. The weak suffer what they must. The strong do as they so wish. And I don't mean that as like, oh, Chad bodybuilder and all that type of stuff, but literally the realistic, people who put
Yeah.
themselves in a strong position are going to deal with the chaos better. And they might even have a joyous experience for all we need. And it might even be very, very quick, very, very quick if you do it smart. Now, what is sort of happening right now is the churning of the last man, as we say, and it's going to happen. It's going to get worse. And that's just one faculty and one force that's going to be in play. And I think what I'd suggest is that if, like, for most people, just get as realistic about what's going on and look and say to yourself, like, what counts as a very effective set of steps to put me in the best position so that I can at the very least say individuate and actualize, so I'm not haven't got that type of pressure. How does that type of work? And Thad was talking about it, about the power of decentralization and these sort of things spreading out. But in terms of what the future is going to look like, is that I would look at these two forces, this great swath of the last man, and I would look at that becoming an incredible entity of power, an incredibly scary one. And I would be looking at the awakening and the realizing that it's like, oh my God, we have to do something. We have to figure out, like, a lot of people are very pissed off about this, and they're trying to react and put in a position of like health and excellence and striving and higher ascendant life and all this type of stuff. And that might be the culture that births the Ubermensch, because now the talk is over. Like the last year or so, the talk is over. There's no this debate about whether, like, oh, is the Ubermensch relevant? Is Nietzsche right? Is Jung right?
Like Molly Meme said, the time for arguments is over.
The time for, yeah, and this is
Oh,
This is sort of it. This is sort of it. It's like the like Nietzsche's prophecy came true, and Jung's, like I've read Jung. Jung doesn't make much prophecies, and he doesn't offer comprehensive solutions, and he offers really cool things, I think, for stuff like artists and interpreting symbols and understanding those type of principles. But it's not a comprehensive life philosophy. It's not something that's going to save anyone. And I mean this because I actually work with people who read a lot of Jung, and their heads are not screwed on straight in some type of sense. So I'm not sure if it's going to be like a Jungian future. I think it's going to be a physiological future. I think that's like, think about what's happening now. It's what is the first principle of the whole drama? It's like to do with the body. It's all about that. That's where it's going to come from. That's been the biggest thing that sort of went down. And there's a Jungian madness to it as well, certainly a sort of psychosis, but fundamentally it's safety, the last man in the body. And out of that comes the assertion what is real, what is instinctive, what is true, which is going towards that type of thing. Now, how that plays out, bro, I'm not smart enough.
I remember I was watching, I believe it was, what's the Catholic channel? EWTN. I think it was like Father Barron, the weightlifter, that Bishop Barron.
Christianity guys.
Yeah. He had this very interesting critique of Jung, and being someone who's read Jung for years now, for decades even, the critique being that Jung lends itself inherently to this sort of like this like weird like haphazard New Ageism that destructured a lot of authority, and in he was talking about the church, but in a way like Jung is not to be treated lightly, because then Jung would lend itself to a lot of the trends that we're seeing now, and really like the co-opting of a lot of the New Age from forces of like reification and the corporatocracy. Like literally, like this is where mindfulness, this is like California Buddhism. This is where, you know, Zizek talks about how Buddhism will be the religion of the future because the corporations, they could like easily exploit it. By the way, I paid quite a few I paid quite a bit more than my usual concert price to go and see the Zizek Jordan Peterson debate. It wasn't a debate, it was a jerk off fest, but I did it for the meme. I did it to live tweet it. But so do you see that, like, maybe not that we should forget Nietzsche, but I'm sorry, not that we should forget Jung, but rather that there's limitations.
To Jung
I
think what you're talking about here is a very interesting conversation, because of course, like, it's a judge the tree by its fruit question, to quote Jesus. You know, it is a sort of situation of like, look at the Nietzscheans, and I think when you read Nietzsche properly and you look at the people who've read him properly, like I see it on Twitter, like there's this group of people who are like physiologically psychopathic. They're like, oh, you've got to lift over everything, bro. And then they've got all these like silly, funny memes, and they're just very, very humorous and sarcastic. And they're just sort of like, you know, it's like a post-physique attitude. I actually see that as like a very fertile production out of Nietzsche. Now, there's a vast majority that come out of him as well that are very, very bad as well. Jung is sort of similar. Like there's this little niche that comes out of him, which you might call the true artist, to actually use him in that type of way and understand that and really pull out his dreams out of that. I try my best to be of that kind of ilk, if you will. And then I see alongside of that, I see a desperately pathological, unhelpful, it's the thing I'm talking about, the neurotic, stuck in the head, jargonizing, everything's an archetype. There's like, it's almost like, you know, you're descending up into this conceptual realm. And then of course, as you said, it tends to lend towards very, very subtle, pernicious things, such as like, there is no biological reality, my problems are archetypical, there is no authority, there's no such thing as hierarchy, and all these type of things, and it's very, very, very floozy and loose in this type of thing. And I see people who come in many different ilks, and to be honest, the most Chad ones are the Christians, and I'd say the Nietzscheans. That's the people who I see coming in. The Jungians are almost always, you know, skinny arms, struggling.
Well, that's the thing. Like I remember this when Terence McKenna got his like sort of revival, and Alan Watts. You could say like there was three waves of the New Age. One being in the sort of the 60s, then the 90s. I would say there was a big one, and which Terence ushered in. Then like around the mid 2000s, there was this like blip of like Facebook, people sharing Alan Watts lectures. But I noticed the shift as I grew into more, what would you say, reactionary trad, perennialist politics. I mean, I have my critiques of them, But the more I grew into that, I noticed this weird shift with a lot of the New Agers, the sort of people that take psychedelics and they read Jung, they read Alan Watts, and they sort of like were really captivated by, like, during the Gamergate days, the sort of like, what would you call them? Like the radical liberalism, because I hate the SJW term is sort of played out, right? But like, let's say they all like sort of switched, and Trump, the era of Trump, like the archetypal energy that came up. I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but those people, they were the first ones to catch the derangement syndrome, and that was like this weird shift of like, maybe this us like maybe there's something more than just like looting these traditional cultures of their nuggets of wisdom, that maybe perhaps the sort of reactionary things that you don't like about them, maybe they were the linchpin to why those traditions work to begin with. And so the problem with like the way Jungianism is taken up, the way that even Nietzsche was taken up for a while by the New Agers, by the way, because there was a period where they loved him too. They didn't grasp the fundamental teachings there, and they have this very like derooted urban bugman worldview, and like, of course they're gonna be like, well, you know, all of this is fascism at the end. I remember, yeah, I could see it. I saw it with my own eyes on Facebook back in the day before I, thank God, landed on Twitter. So, but maybe it was a curse. Who knows? But maybe a Hora Mazda is telling me to go on Twitter and tricking me. But so this has been such a great conversation. You must come again. You must come again with my friend in the chat, Flight Astro. He's asking.
I'd love to. I sent him a message. We were talking on Twitter, and if he, I don't know, was he asking any questions there today, because I wanted to banter. But yeah, I'd love to come on board. Like, I love talking about this stuff. I love talking absolute crazy and wacky, and I think there's a lot of interesting things. And like, you do have to forgive me a little bit, because I try to build up a lot of context, because it's almost like it's not necessarily what I think, but the way I'm looking at it that I think is important.